Welcome to Sober Sunrise, a podcast bringing you AA speaker meetings with stories of experience, strength, and hope from around the world. We bring you several new speakers weekly, so be sure to subscribe. We hope to always remain an ad-free podcast, so if you'd like to help us remain self-supporting, please visit our website at sober-sunrise.com. Whether you join us in the morning or at night, there's nothing better than a sober sunrise. We hope that you enjoy today's speaker.
So my dad's diagnosed with terminal brain cancer, and I mentioned before the break that I was able to be present for the next 7 months, but not at first. At first, we had lots of activity because we were told that unless he had surgery, he would be dead within a matter of weeks, and that if he had surgery, they couldn't cure anything, but they could remove the tumor and prolong his life by up to 18 months. So he obviously had the surgery. And by the way, he never heard that. When the doctors approached him to tell him he had brain cancer, before they could give him any prognosis, he interrupted them and told him that lots of his relatives had cancer. They all lived 5 to 15 years, and he would do the same. And my siblings and I, wondered for a while, should we correct him? Should we, tell him the truth? And after some prayer, we just decided that, unless he asked, he heard what he wanted to heard, he said what he needed to say, and it just wasn't our business to butt in. But he had his surgery, and he did well, and he came home from the surgery, and my fear set in. I mean, just paralyzing fear. I showed up at his house when we took him home, and then I went back to my sister's, and then I went back to his house and just cried. I mean, I was so afraid. And I remember sitting on the floor, and his head's all bandaged up, and I'm weeping, and he's patting me on the head and telling me, we can't live like this. We're just going to have to do this one day at a time. And so I went home and I wrote a short piece of fear inventory that I'd like to share. And I like to share some inventory because for me it was so helpful when people shared their inventory with me. Not that this is not the kind of inventory I wrote at 6 months sober or 1 year sober. It's the kind of inventory I write today. So it's not to compare, but just to let you know what God has revealed to me and the beauty of this spiritual walk. I had half a dozen fears. The prayer was, God, please help me find you. Help me walk beyond the fear to the place of your peace. In my fears, I'm afraid that my dad will suffer overwhelming emotional pain about his cancer and possible death. Why? I'm afraid of how he'll feel, that I won't be able to make him feel better. Self-reliance fails me because no matter what I do, I can't ensure that he'll feel any different. Can't do it. I'm afraid that I won't be able to help him. Why? I'm powerless. Again, I can't rely on myself to come up with the power to help him. I can't even be sure I know how or what kind of help he needs. I'm afraid that he'll die without knowing how much God loves him. Why? Again, I'm powerless over this. No matter what I do, I can't guarantee that Dad will have a loving relationship with God. I arrogantly presume I know what he needs. And my father had no real faith, and he was afraid to die. I'm afraid he'll die not knowing how much we all love him. Why? Do I really want the power to control his mind and perceptions? Yep. I do want to be God on this one. I'm afraid that he'll suffer physical pain with his disease. Again, it's out of my hands. I can't even rely on my very best efforts of manipulation to prevent this. I'm afraid that he won't get to do or live the way he's always dreamt of living and that he'll have regrets. Why? I can't make this happen. I can't control what he does or feels. Self-reliance fails me. And all these fears are about how he'll feel, how he'll, his experience. And then I got to the truth. The real fear was that I'm afraid of his life from now until his death. I got to see how selfish I am. I believed that with you, people like you and God, that I could let go at death, that I would be okay, but I don't know what to do with my feelings while he's alive. I'm more afraid of his life until death than I am of his death. that's just the height of self-centeredness. Why I'm an absolute coward, totally absorbed with self. I have no power to change what my dad feels, so my response is to eliminate the source of my discontent. My fears that I will be uncomfortable while he's alive will rob me of being able to be of any service to him. Self-reliance not only fails me, it allows fear to steal my last opportunities to share time in life with my father. The better way? Trust and rely on God. Trust that God will not forsake my dad. Trust that God will direct my actions if I'm willing to play the role he assigns. Turn to God in all things, every fear about my dad's life, about his feelings, about his actions. If I really want to walk my talk, I must be willing to depend entirely on God, to truly allow that part of me that believes she knows best to die. For the first time in my life, I think I understand the true meaning of the word courage. The dictionary defines it as the ability to conquer fear or despair. To me, it is to come face to face with the prospect of the hole in the donut by allowing that part of me that desperately wants to hold on to die and to let go to God. And then my prayer was, God, forgive me, take away my fear, my selfish desires, direct my attention to what you would have me be, please use me. And it was freeing. It's not always pretty to see just how selfish and self-seeking I am. What this boiled down to is I would have been more comfortable with his immediate death so that I wouldn't have to feel bad imagining what he was feeling. But thank goodness for that awareness, because with the awareness came the willingness to be changed, and God took the fear away, and one day at a time I was present. I was genuinely present. And because of my circumstances, because I was just going where I was guided, and I had no idea that living in this little bitty room at my sister's meant I was going to be available to my dad. My office, by the way, at that time was just literally 2 miles from his home. And so at lunchtime, I'd take him for radiology, or we'd go have his favorite Chinese, or we'd do this, we'd do that. I learned his physical therapy and helped him with that. And so I saw him at lunchtime, and I saw him, after work on my way wherever. And my dad trusted me. I was his power of attorney. I had his wallet. I took him to the bookie. Nobody knew where the bookie was. And just one day at a time, that process of being present with my father taught me so many things about love and about intimacy. And one of the greatest things I learned that I love to share is how it transformed so many things. But up until that point, I really believed that to be happy, I needed to live as though every day were the last day of my life. And with my father's dying experience, what I came to understand was to know a new happiness, I needed to live as though every day were the last day of your life. And my dad let me practice that one day at a time. And it was wasn't always easy, but it was beautiful. And when he died at the end of May 2000, he was a gambler, and he ended up in the hospital the last week of his life. The nurses had a pool going on. We have the Indy 500 at home, and of course my dad, he got in on that action, and he died May 31st. And he won the pool. And he was already unconscious by that time. But something else I learned, going back to this second step, and what is my conception of God. My father, when he went into the hospital, he heard what the doctors were telling him, and what they told him that morning was, you've probably got less than 6 months to live. And he heard that he was dying, and so he began dying. And within a day, he was unconscious. And my dad's cancer was diagnosed because he had a seizure. And the seizures just scared him. Oh, they just literally scared. He was more frightened of the seizures than anything else. And he had 2 more. And during one of the earlier in his illness, he was hospitalized because they had put him on Dilantin or some anti-seizure drug, and he had a bad reaction to it. And he was in the hospital, and I went to visit him, and he was shaky, and they were getting him off that drug so they could get him on another one, and he was trying to avoid having a catheter, and he needed to urinate, and so the nurse handed him the urinal, and we asked if he needed help, and he said, no, I'm fine. And so we step outside, pull the curtain, and it doesn't sound right, what he's doing. And so, Dad, are you okay? Yeah, I'm fine. And so when he was done, we opened the curtain, and he had urinated all over my coat. And and this is, I don't know, I just think it's such a beautiful metaphor because I was so grateful that my dad could urinate. Okay? And it didn't matter that he had peed all over my coat. You know, he had no more control over that than I had over my alcoholism. You know, he was doing the best he could. And but anyway, they got him on some better medication, and so he didn't have any more seizures. But those last 3 days of his life before he lost consciousness, the last thing I remember seeing in my father's eyes was fear. Stark, raving fear. And because of my circumstances, my sister has children, and everybody else had something else, but I was available. So I stayed there those last 3 days and nights. And if you've been around someone who's dying, the dying process is not pleasant. You know, just the things the body goes through and everything that manifests as a result of that. And on that, near the end, the day before he died, he was in a coma 3 days. He started having a seizure. And his eyes were open, but we didn't know what he saw. But my sister she knew how frightened he was of that. So she went down the hallway screaming for a nurse. And I was able to take my dad's hand and look into his eyes and comfort him and talk to him. And I don't know what he heard, and I don't know if he saw anything. But what I do know that is if he did see or hear anything, he heard and saw love. I was able to be there for him and with him. He had another seizure, and then on the morning of the 31st, he was struggling. Oh, he was struggling. His breathing was so labored. And my sister and I took a walk wondering, and by this time, everybody had wanted him to stay. Please hang on, please hang on. And by this time, my brothers, everybody, it's hard to watch. You know, why won't he go? And so my sister and I were wondering, well, maybe he needs to know something. Let's go talk to him about it. So we went back and we told him, I mean, he's not communicating with us, but we told him, Dad, it's okay. Everything's taken care of. You know, all the arrangements are made. You don't need to worry about anything. We're okay. The only thing that's outstanding is the boys think you should be buried in flannel. We think you ought to wear a suit, but we'll work it out. Okay? Honest to goodness, within minutes, my father took his last breath. You know? And that's important because later on, and it was a very holy moment, by the way. I don't think there's anything more holy than that kind of birth or death, depending upon how you look at it. And at that moment, it didn't feel good, okay? When my father took his last breath, or last exhalation, there was an overwhelming sorrow and pain and grief. It hurt to the bone. It just hurt to the bone. But concurrent with that was this overwhelming awareness of the presence and love of God. This wasn't God doing anything to anybody. This was God there with us, sustaining us. And later, when I was reflecting upon my father's death, and under this mistaken belief that he died without knowing God and died in fear, and how wrong that is, and just kind of getting angry. And somebody pointed out to me, now when you talked to your dad, he left, right? Mm-hmm. Why do you suppose he stayed? See, I believe at some point he had a choice. I believe that he and God did meet. That's just my belief. I believe that if he had still been frightened to die, we could have told him anything and it wouldn't have made a difference. He would have continued to hang on. But the fact that when we told him he left, I just choose to believe that, it's infinite God. It's beyond my understanding. And I absolutely don't believe that God loves my father any less than me, or that God wants any less of a relationship with my father than he wants with me. Simply because I'm an AA and my dad's not. I don't believe that. That's not the God of my understanding. We buried my father. We had a beautiful ceremony. My dear friend Mike helped out. My dad didn't go to church, and Mike knows us and the family, and it was personal and it was beautiful. And Richard, by the way, during this 7 months, Richard's out there doing what he needs to do. He originally went to see a doctor. He was very depressed, and he got some outside help. And he ended up being in a therapy group 4 nights a week, 4 hours a night with 9 women. And he laughed about it too. But he did that, and then he got back into AA. And what I mean by that, and I'm not saying anything he didn't say from the podium, he began making amends that hadn't been made to some ex-wives and adult children, and doing what he needed to do. And he approached me shortly after my father's death and asked me if he could make amends to me. And we met, and beautiful, beautiful amends. He summed it up by telling me that he wanted my happiness for me more than anything else. The man taught me so much. And that if that meant reconciling, he would be delighted to reconcile. And if that meant divorce, we could divorce. He and I both love Don P. Bless his heart. And Don talks about traditions a lot. And we had heard Don talk about the second tradition and how group conscience ends with a vote. And the principle being that as long as you're talking and exchanging information, God, there is one ultimate authority, God as he expresses himself, but we have to share information, we have to talk, and if we continue that process, at some point we'll take a vote, but we'll know what it is before we take it, because we'll be of one mind. And so Richard and I decided that we would not call for a vote. We would just let the second tradition work in our relationship. And it wasn't too much longer after that, he had been going to the doctor that summer because he'd had back pain and stomach pain and had seen a lot of GI people. And anyway, I got a call on a Friday that his CAT scan came back very abnormal and that we needed to bring him into the hospital for the weekend. So I called him up and went by and picked him up after work, and we went to the hospital, and this is in August. And between my dad's death and his death, by the way, my first sponsor, Janet, had come back and gotten sober, and she had died in June. And Richard's sponsor, Phil, had died in July. But these are people who had great faith, and so they died very differently than my dad. But it was still, it's a lot of, and we all do it. If we live, we observe death. But the point is, we went to the hospital, and when we got on the elevator, she pushed the 7th floor. And we knew what that was. That's the oncology unit. And between the 1st floor and the 7th floor, without a word, Richard and I had our group conscience. We just took each other's hand, and we knew what to do. We got to the 7th floor. We got to his room. The doctor showed up, and he explained to us that Richard had pancreatic cancer. And the following morning, we got the prognosis. It had already metastasized to several major organs. And when he left the hospital Sunday, we picked up his stuff, and by this time, by the way, I had moved into a little one-bedroom apartment. After my dad's death, it was just the right time, so I moved into a little one-bedroom apartment that I could afford. And anyway, we picked up Richard's stuff, and I brought him home, and it was just big enough. And for the next 2.5 months, Richard and I got to live together and love each other in a way I never thought was possible. We got to enjoy an intimacy that had absolutely nothing to do with sex. And he taught me so much. Pancreatic cancer wastes the body, and I watched this man literally disappear before my very eyes. One of the things that became so abundantly clear, I'm so immature, and I have so many childish ideas. And I watched this man literally disappear. He's 5'11", almost 6 feet tall, and near the end of his death, he was maybe 80 pounds. And I was helping him with his bath one day, and he knew what he looked like. He was watching himself in the mirror. And he asked me if I found him repulsive. And it just broke my heart. The truth was that as he diminished physically before my very eyes, I found him more precious. And I have these ideas my entire life. I've been so judgmental about this vessel that God gives us, that allows us to be here. I've been judgmental about my own and about, everyone else's, and just never really appreciated what this vessel is really about. And what it's really all about is just simply a vehicle for us to be here on planet Earth today. He didn't want to die without me, which I'm the woman that oftentimes you didn't want to be around me because I would break your heart so deeply. And he didn't want to die without me, and he didn't. We stayed at home, and people like you, thank you, brought meetings in to Richard, and just did what AA does. We ended up in hospice because near the end he woke me up and told me that he needed to go to the hospital because he couldn't breathe. And we went to the hospital, and he was getting at one point, several hours after we were there, just very agitated, and he was in a lot of pain, even with the morphine, and thank God for morphine. He was up and he was down, and at one point I suggested to him that he didn't have to struggle anymore. He could just relax and take it easy. And he did. And he drifted into a coma. But he waited. He had this was just shortly before I met all you good folks in Virginia. Richard, his daughter her husband had gotten a job transfer to Richmond, and so he waited, I think, until she and her family and his sisters got here. They're all over the place, and when everybody was here, he died. And again, it was a very, very holy moment. Painful, didn't feel good, but it was good. And we had an AA funeral. I got to tell you, it was interesting because before he died, his daughter had just moved to Richmond. Literally like a week before he was diagnosed. And so they came back for a visit, and and I was present for the birth of my granddaughter, and it's hard, And I was thinking, how am I going to stay in contact with them? How am I going to see them? And then it occurred to me, what's already taken care of because I'm talking at the convention. Yeah. And it was. Anyway, that's off the track. It's just everything happens on time in God's world. I didn't know when I got invited to come talk at the Richmond convention, or the whatever it was, Hampton. I didn't know that, prior to that, Richard was going to die, and his daughter and my granddaughters were going to be here, and I'd be able to extend my visit. I didn't know that. I can't know. I don't know. But anyway, so they come, and Richard dies, and we have a typical AA funeral. I'm sure that you've all been there, seen them. And our families, they knew we were in AA, obviously, but they never really hung out with people like you. And at the funeral, they hung out with people like you. And it was extraordinary because there was lots of love and lots of good things were said, and it was truly a celebration of his life. And afterwards, at his sister's house, his niece, I love this story, his niece, who was 14 at the time, came up to me and she said, "Aunt Linda," I said, "Yeah." She said, "I wish I was an alcoholic." And I heard what she was saying. See, what she experienced alcoholism to be was this. What she connected with alcoholism was this energy, this love, this unity, and kids get it. They get it. And she got it. And if we leave that kind of legacy, even just here and there, what a beautiful thing to leave. What a beautiful thing to leave. Richard had a daughter, an older daughter, that he didn't know until she was an adult. She found him, and her name is Michelle, and she never really got to know him the way she would have liked to. And I felt compelled after the funeral to give her his big book because it had his notes in it. I mean, she'd never had the relationship with him that she'd wanted and was feeling really cheated and abandoned. She didn't say so, but anyway, I just was guided to give her his big book, and so I did. And that was in November of 2000, and I got an email from her November 14th of 2001, and it says, "Linda, hello, how are you doing? I am well, I'm pregnant, and I'm emailing you because I wanted to thank you." This was her second child. And anyway, I wanted to thank you. "I started going to AA meetings 2 months ago. I have a sponsor, and she's great. I read regularly from my father's big book. I'm working through step 2, which has been difficult for me. I have come to believe that you and my father helped me understand what a higher power can mean. When you gave me the big book, I had no idea that he was going to save me. I was going to call you, but I knew that I would only cry. Thank you so much for helping me find the gift of sobriety. I know that this November must be difficult, and I send you all my love." Blah, blah, blah. It's the 12th step in action with nothing more than the book. I mean, really, nothing more than the book. And I talked to her this past fall, and she's making amends, and the beat goes on. Yeah, the beat goes on. I continued to live in that little one-bedroom apartment and pay my bills. And I don't know how it happened, but the 5-year get-out-of-debt plan was done in, I know how it happened. It was done in 3 years because somehow I managed to start saving money. Go figure. Yeah. And so I started saving money, and I got to a point where what I had saved equaled, what I owed was diminishing, and what I was saving was, and they were the same. And I thought, well, I'll just keep saving because I'm not paying any interest over here, and I couldn't do it. It's like, nah, it's not right. This isn't your money. This is their money. They want their money back, Linda. So I paid it off in 3 years instead of 5. And amazingly, by that time, I was free to go or free to stay. I'm in this little one-bedroom apartment, which, by the way, at one time in my life, sober, I could not have done. I certainly couldn't have had anybody over there. And Margaret came and stayed with me. She came and fifth stepped there in that little dinky little one-bedroom apartment. I was free to do anything there. I mean, I couldn't have large parties, but not without being really cozy. But the point is that I didn't need to have something bigger and better. I truly was free to stay there or leave. And another lady I walk with is a realtor, and she was trying to convince me that at the time, interest rates were low, you really should buy a house, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I don't know. I finally have some cash flow again. And anyway, it didn't matter. And so it just kind of looked casually. And the short story is I did end up buying a house that I didn't really, I liked it and it felt right and it was just the right house, but it was actually out of my price range, so I didn't make any offer. And then she came back and she said, well, they dropped the price. I'm like, oh, really? I said, well, I don't know. I don't know. Well, then a few days later, or a couple weeks later, they dropped the price again. I'm like, oh, okay, well, I guess. And this is just so foreign to me to not be attached, because when I go shopping for anything, I don't care what it is, I'm really attached. I gotta have it, and I've gotta have it now. But I got the house, and it was a conscious decision. I understood that, you can have cash flow or you can have a mortgage, and there are different outcomes to both, and either one's okay, and it is okay. I have a guest room now, which is wonderful because, people can actually sleep there. I open my home up to my family and to my friends, and it's just a modest little 3-bedroom. It's fine. It's a blessing. It's a house. It's my home, and I love being there. It's my sanctuary. Prior to that, I don't know, this keeps coming to mind, so I need to share it. If you've been a caretaker of that type, and I was for a while, my dad and then Richard, it's kind of like anything else you get really involved in, service work even. When you're done, you're just kind of like missing an arm or something. It's like, what do you do? And then there's the grief and everything else. And by the way, I don't think that grieving means that we're not spiritually fit. We're human. And my grief would just come in waves. I'd be absolutely stable and okay, and then out of nowhere, I'd be weeping in the middle of the grocery store, in a staff meeting at the office. It just came like that for me. But I enrolled in this flower arrangement class. I'd always wanted to do this and hadn't. And it was a once-a-week class, and it was maybe the 4th or 5th week. And I was... the joy of the present. I was arranging these flowers, and it was just about the flowers. I don't know why I'm tearing up like this. But it was just about the flowers. And it was just pure joy. And they were just flowers. But it's the kind of joy that I do get to experience every now and then when I'm just totally present. I can remember having the same experience with a spider. There was a spider. Have you ever watched a spider make a web? Oh my gosh. Yeah. I would have missed that. I would have been at the mall. Just all kinds of joys. We're going to take a break and then have one more short session, but before we do that, I'm jumping around a little bit, but the 10th step talks about this vision that we develop, and on page 85, after we've made amends and we're into 10 and in between 10 and 11, it talks about how it's easy to let up on this spiritual program of action and rest on our laurels, which I thought was a plant. When I first came in, I didn't get it. Someone explained to me later what laurels were, but it says we're not cured of alcoholism, but we have a daily reprieve contingent on the maintenance of our spiritual condition. And then they tell me, I think, one of the ways that I maintain my spiritual condition every day is a day when I must carry the vision of God's will into all my activities. I used to think that God's will was my activities. That God's will for me was what I'm going to do. Who I'm going to be married, I'm going to be his wife, I'm going to be this person at work, I'm going, whatever. But after meditating upon this for quite some time, I have come to believe that when it says every day is a day when we must carry the vision of God's will, which I don't know God's will, but I develop a vision of it in my meditation, I have to carry the vision of God's will into all of my activities. It's a subtle twist, but for me, I don't think the activities are God's will. I think it's what I bring to the activity, which is me. What am I bringing? Am I bringing the selfish, fear-driven, chaotic mess that I can be on any given moment? Or am I bringing something else? Am I bringing calmness? Am I bringing happiness? Am I bringing a desire to serve? Or am I bringing a desire to be served? So I've really come to believe that God's will is about who I am right now. What would you have? Direct my attention to what you would have me be. And that's what I take into my activities. Personally, I don't think God cares what I'm doing. I really don't. Why should he? Whether I'm working here or working there, married to him, married to her, why would he care? I think he cares how I behave. I think he cares how I treat his other kids. I think he cares maybe not where I work, but how I work with you. I don't think he cares who I marry, but how I honor the sanctity of marriage. Those are that's not Big Book, that's Linda. That's just where I am today. And then it goes on to say, this prayer continues with, how can I best serve thee? Thy will, not mine, be done. These are thoughts which must go with us constantly. Well, how often would constantly be? Yeah, it does. I have to practice that. These are not thoughts that go with me constantly. So I need to be reminded that these are thoughts which must go with me constantly. And guess what? This is where I get to exercise will. It says we can exercise willpower along this line all we wish. It's the proper use of will. So finally, I know what to do with this gift of will that God has given me. And that is to try to develop and carry a vision of his will into my activities and pray. How can I best serve you? Later on in our 11th step, they tell us twice that we have to constantly remind ourselves that we are no longer running the show. I have to constantly remind myself that I am no longer running the show. The beautiful thing about the 11th step is that we get precise directions. The book goes immediately into ways to pray and meditate, and specifically when we retire at night, what we do. And I think that's in perfect order. To begin at night, they begin the entire 11-step practice with, when we retire at night, we constructively review our day. And that's my prayer and that's my meditation. And I think that's ideal because when I reflect upon my day and I ask myself and meditate upon those questions, where was I resentful, selfish, dishonest? What should I have done instead? Was I kind and loving? On and on. I get a checklist, if you will, for things that I might need to take care of tomorrow. I've had to go back to the dry cleaners and apologize, make amends to the person there because I took my little hoity-toity self in there and they weren't moving quick enough for me, and you're here to serve me, and ugly. But if I'm doing that nighttime meditation and constructively reviewing my day, then I have an opportunity to take care of things quickly. And my life doesn't become like the toilet that's never flushed. I know it's a graphic. It's someone else gave it to me. I like it though. I'll tell you the other benefit of doing this at night, this constructively reviewing my day and going through these questions is, at the beginning it was always, was I selfish? Yeah. Was I dishonest? Uh-huh. Was I afraid? You betcha. Do I owe an apology? A couple. Have I kept something to myself? Mm-hmm. Image management, can't talk about it. Was I kind and loving toward all? Uh-uh. What could I have done better? Quite a bit. Was I thinking of myself most of the time? Practically. Or was I thinking of what I could do for others? A little bit. But we must be careful. Don't drift into worry, remorse, or morbid reflection, because that's just self-centeredness. It's going to diminish my usefulness to others. And then I ask and accept God's forgiveness, and ask what corrective action should be taken, and I meditate upon that. And so I've got what I need to start. I literally make a list some nights so that I can put my head on my pillow and know that I can take care of it tomorrow. Now, what happens after a while is I start doing this, and was I resentful today? No. Wow. Do I owe an apology? Not today. Not today. Was I thinking of what I could do for others? Yeah, to some extent I was. And over time I begin to see what grace looks like. Over time I begin to see the miracle manifesting itself in my life. And it's not of me. And I get to see that just by paying attention. And I know that's not of my doing. That's the miracle. And if I'm not practicing this, I'll miss it. It may be happening, but I won't be aware of it. And who would want to miss that? Your own experience. The fact that we then, on awakening, we think about the 24 hours a day. We consider our plans. We don't make them. I used to make them. I'd sit down and I'd say the prayer. I'd ask God, direct my thinking, divorce it from self-pity, dishonest, self-seeking motives, and let me make my to-do list. And if I make my to-do list, there's no room for spontaneity. There's no room for God's will. I'm going to consider my plans, and it tells me in the book that at this point, God gave me brains to use, and I can use them. It also tells me my thought life's going to be on a much higher plane. My thinking's cleared of wrong motives. And the wrong motives were identified. That's what I asked to be divorced from. It also tells me that I'm going to face indecision. Well, if I'm making a to-do list, there's no indecision. I know exactly what I'm going to do. Don't get in my way. Yeah, I got to be there now. It's interesting to see how that works on the interstate when I've got to be there now. But I might face indecision. And they tell me exactly what to do. Pray, ask for inspiration, intuitive thought, or a decision. And here's the part that's the most difficult. And then relax and take it easy. Relax, don't think harder. Relax and take it easy. We don't struggle. I don't know about you, but that's just counterintuitive for me. When I'm indecisive, I need to do something, take some action. Let's get a bigger hammer. Let's figure it out. And I'm told not to do that, to just relax and take it easy. That's practicing faith for me. And it is amazing how, if we will do that and practice that faith, answers come. Sometimes they're not God's answers, but and the book says that we're likely to take all kinds of absurd actions. I bought oils once because it was God's will. I've done a lot of things because I thought it was, now tell me this happens. He or she walks into the room, your eyes meet, and it's a God thing. It's a God thing. Yeah. Or the dress is on sale. It's a God thing. Yeah. So I'm told how to start my day. I'm told that I can share that meditation with others. I'm told how to pray. And then I'm told that as I go through the day and I become agitated or doubtful, and I will, I always do, I'm irritated or I don't know what to do. Well, instead of thinking harder, it suggested that I pause. Imagine that. Pause when agitated or doubtful. And pray, and ask for the right thought or decision. And this is when, here's the part I forget. As we go through the day, we pause when agitated or doubtful and ask for the right thought or decision. And I want it now. But then I have to read the next line, which says, we constantly remind ourselves that we are no longer running the show. Saying to ourselves many times each day, thy will be done. And I had to put that on a little Post-it next to my computer at work because I just forget. I leak. I know the stuff. I read the stuff. I read the stuff with others, and then I go into the office or anywhere else and I forget. I have to constantly remind myself that I'm no longer running the show. And that, I think, means constantly. And I do need to be reminded of that constantly. And then we have wonderful 11-step promises. And on page 88, it says that if we do these things, we are then in much less danger of excitement, fear, anger, worry, self-pity, or foolish decisions. We become much more efficient. We do not tire so easily. Anybody get tired? Do you just have days where, man, I'm just so tired? It's amazing how well meditation works. Meditation works so well that I'll stop using it. This is working. I think I'll stop. And then I'm exhausted again. We do not tire so easily, for we're not burning up energy foolishly as we did when we were trying to arrange life to suit ourselves. It works. It really does. And they tell us that we are undisciplined and that we let God discipline us in the simple way just outlined, the first 11 steps. And I used to have this really negative feeling about discipline. I associated it with punishment, which it's not. I'm so glad for Webster's. But the way I understand discipline today, it's a very loving thing. And parents, for instance, who insist that their children brush their teeth, really love their children. They're willing for the child to be unhappy for a moment and have teeth so that he or she can eat. To love enough to provide the structure that's needed for another person's welfare is hard work. It's hard work. And it's hard as humans. And I can see where that does and doesn't happen as a human. But I think it's so beautiful that we, and there are many other spiritual practices that have the same thing, but this one works for me. And it's so beautiful that some power greater than myself loved us so much that he literally inspired a book of direction that would give me what I cannot give myself, which is a loving discipline, a way of living, a design for living that really, really works. I think it's probably time for a break, and then we'll come back for a short session, I guess. So you want to take 10 minutes? Okay. Thank you. Okay. Let's see. We probably need to wrap up soon. I know that sitting is hard work, and I've just been yada, 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 yada. And bless your hearts, thank you. So I think that we'll just have a short session and be done. It occurred to me that I hadn't talked much about that third piece of inventory, the conduct inventory, which, the book starts off by saying, now about sex, which always got my attention. But so the first several times I wrote this inventory, it was purely about sexual conduct or conduct with people with whom I had sexual relationships or hopes for sexual. And it was pretty simple the way I was taken through it. On page 69, there are there are two paragraphs. One's right in the middle of the book, and it tells me exactly what to do. It says, I review my conduct over the years past, and then I'm given a series of questions. Well, the first time I wrote this, I went chronologically from Bobo in kindergarten It's just what I did. And I asked these questions: where had I been selfish? Where had I been dishonest? Where had I been inconsiderate? Now, it occurred to me that a lot of these questions sounded repetitive because when I wrote in resentment inventory, I looked in that last column at where I'd been selfish, where I'd been dishonest, and it was explained to me that I still need to look at these questions here because a lot's happened since resentment inventory. You know, I may have been resentful at someone. I may have gotten to that fourth column, but then I had that prayer and meditation. I've looked at fears. And so by the time I get to conduct inventory, I'm actually looking at everything differently because I'm free of resentment, I'm free of fear, and now I can really look at my conduct. And today I don't limit this to just sexual conduct. Today when I write inventory about my boss, you know, I'm resentful, blah, blah, blah. I look at the fears, okay. And then I ask myself, where was I selfish? Where was I dishonest? Where was I inconsiderate? Who did I hurt? Did I unjustifiably arouse jealousy? How about suspicion? What about bitterness? I can do that in the workplace. Where was I at fault? What should I have done instead? Probably anything other than what I did. We got this all down on paper and looked at it. So it's not something I do in my head. It's something I do on paper. And it's real important that I do that because the next paragraph tells me that it's in this way I try to shape a sane and sound ideal for my future sex life. I subject each relation to the test, was it selfish or not? And they all are for me. I have not had one relationship yet that was not selfish. Maybe it's enlightened selfishness, but it's still selfishness. And then I'm given some prayers. I ask God, I pray. I ask God to mold my ideals and help me to live up to them, remembering always that my sex powers, suggest that sex is powerful, were God-given and good, not to be used lightly or selfishly, which I did a whole lot of, nor to be despised and loathed, which I did a whole lot of. Whatever my ideal turns out to be, I must be willing to grow toward it. And there's some more there. This is so important because after I wrote that first bit of inventory, my sponsor led me into literally writing out a sane and sound ideal for my future. And I'm on my fourth one over the years, and I carry each one in my wallet, and it's amazing. I carry it in my wallet because later on, when I don't know what to do, I pull it out, and it's like, okay, are your actions going to take you toward or away from this? And so it's a wonderful barometer. It's a guidepost, if you will. I happened to have a piece of earlier inventory. It wasn't the first one. This is one where I was having trouble with my relationship again. And so I did kind of a group thing. I won't read the entire inventory, but I began answering the questions, and the prayer was, God, please help me see more. I've been selfish with all these men in that I was always in the relationships for what I needed. It was about what I could get from them: emotional security, praise, money, things, and protection. And there was never enough of any of this. I was dishonest. I had nothing real to share with them. I simply became who I thought they wanted. I was dishonest in making promises and vows that I knew I wasn't willing to keep. I always knew that divorce or walking out was an option. Always had a door open. No commitment. I was inconsiderate by always thinking of my needs, and even when I did consider their needs, it was based on what I thought they needed. Never ask anybody. And then I list the men I had hurt and how. The common pattern was I tell them lies to get what I think I need and want. I make promises I don't keep. I aroused jealousy, suspicion, and bitterness as I would drift away, often toward another Prince Charming. Each of these men were good men, polite, considerate, generous, kind, and loving. They deserved to be treated so much differently. Where was I at fault? I lied. Contrary to what I've always told them, I haven't really ever wanted to spend a whole lot of time with them. I was always selfish, always trying to fulfill my own emotional needs, believing that I needed to own anyone that claimed to love me, that is, marry him, or make sure that he understood that if he loved me, we should be married. That's an old idea. If you love me, you should want to marry me. I never embraced the spirit of marriage. Rather, it was a legal contract that protected me. I'm at fault in responding to whoever notices me and expresses an attraction. I never discriminated when it came to the attention of men. In short, I am a self-centered self-seeker who is attracted to being attractive too, and I always seek to fulfill my own emotional voids. I have both loathed and despised sex, how I used it, and my sexual partners. I have used my sex powers very lightly and selfishly to get what I wanted when I want it, and I've often done it without having sex. And you probably understand what I'm talking about. What should I have done? Told the truth, kept my promises, kept sex sacred and good, been willing to give what I wanted rather than take, and in many instances just stayed out of their lives. And none of that's pretty. And none of that's really who I am. It's who I became. It's where these things drove me. And that last piece, what should I have done instead, became my springboard for my sane, sound ideal. It was my second one. Tell the truth, keep my promises, keep sex sacred and good. Be willing to give rather than take. And my sponsor explained to me that my sane and sound ideal is not a resume for him. It's not he needs to be this. It's about who I want to bring to the relationship. I'd never thought about it from that angle. So that's been a wonderful thing. My current sane and sound ideal that I've been carrying for some time, each one, by the way, has come to pass without me really even noticing. It's, it says if we're willing to grow toward it, which I generally am. I wouldn't have written it if I wasn't. And we do it with God. And the book tells us that we are not the arbiters of anyone's conduct. I have absolutely no business judging what you do, and likewise, I tell the women I walk with that, if it's your ideal to hang out with 12 monkeys, that's fine, as long as you and God are okay with it, Who am I? My current ideal is I pray that I may grow in faith and have the courage to be true to God, capital Y-U, and be honest with my love. I pray that I may never violate another. I pray that I may love in ways that God would have me, in ways that heal and are expressions of His love through me. I pray that I may honor another and not trespass or deceive. I pray for willingness to go where you lead, where God leads, never using another to satisfy my needs or blaming another for my lack. And actually a great deal of that has come to pass, and I got to see that in the final days with Richard. And it continues to develop. I mentioned that Richard and I wanted to be friends before lovers, and we did the best we could, but I'm actually having a relationship today with my best friend, with my friend Mike, whom I've known for years and years and years. And, it truly is amazing how when we look back, the things we put into God's hands turn out to be better than anything we could have planned or expected. And I continue to learn about love in ways I never thought possible. I don't need to be married today. I don't need him to want to marry me, which is a good thing, because I don't think he does. And that's fine. It's not about that. But to be open to the possibilities of what God might have in store makes life truly an adventure. To not know what's around the corner is extraordinary. And to just learn about love, to just learn about love, and to love someone as they are, where they are. Still learning that one, What I do understand is that if I can't love you as you are, where you are, it's not love. It's not love. It's something, but it's not love. And I learned that in all of my relationships. Going back to the 12th step, having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to other alcoholics and to practice these principles in all of our affairs. The 12th step is the reason for the first 11. And that is, if you will, what I believe God's will is for me today. And that's a full-time job, to try to carry this message to other alcoholics and to try to practice these principles in all of my affairs. That's plenty. I don't really need to spend too much time thinking about what you're doing or how it's affecting me. I got to watch my brothers, who both drink like we people of my type drink. And when I first got sober, I did everything that Chapter 7 says don't do. And I read the chapter, and my sponsor read it with me, and I understood the black ink on the white page, and I did everything it said not to do. I was handing out big books and pamphlets, and I was just irritating a lot of people because I had the answer, and could have ruined some, and might have ruined some opportunities. But eventually I got to a point where I understood with my brothers that I wasn't going to save them or fix them, and that I could actually love them, sober or drunk. That I could doesn't mean I have to enable them, but I can love them, sober or drunk, and that's a tremendous freedom. I can remember in early sobriety when I would get close to someone and they drink, I'd get mad and hurt and angry and go through all this emotional trauma. They drank, and I'm going through the trauma. Because everything's about how I feel. And today it's such a tremendous freedom to understand that I don't understand. I had to experience a lot of despair in order to find the blessing of the life I have today. And I don't believe I could embrace and experience the blessing of the life I have today without every bit of that despair. So who am I to stand in the way of yours? Who am I to get in the way of anybody's despair? If that's their journey, where they need to go. And my brothers Bobby and Kevin, they've got plenty of enabling going on. We have a mother who's loving them to death. God bless her. God bless her. And what do I know? My brother Bobby did, and some of you have heard about this, he did get sober a couple of years ago. He was very, very in bad shape. He's got a wife and 2 kids, and he was living at this raunchy hotel. And he called me up, and we didn't know where he was really or what he was doing, but he called me up and just drunk as could be and wanted to know if I would come see him. And I said, why? And he said, because I'm lonely. I said, okay, I'll come see you, Bobby. So I picked up a sandwich, and I went over, and he opened the door, and and it was just all there. The despair, I don't need to describe it. It was all there. So he ate the sandwich, and I said, I'm going to a meeting. Do you want to go? And, oh, no, I'm too drunk to go to AA. And so the next day he calls me and wants to know if I'll come visit. And I said, how come? He said, I'm lonely. So I picked up a sandwich, and I showed up. We went through a similar thing, and I said, I'm going to a meeting tonight. Do you want to go? Oh, no, I'm never going to AA drunk again. And because you taught me to listen, I heard what he was saying. He can't stop drinking, but he's got this idea that he can't go to a meeting drunk. He's in a no-win situation. And so I said, Bobby, it's Alcoholics Anonymous, not Sober People Anonymous. Yeah. And but he didn't go, so he called me the next day. He said, will you come over? I said, sure, I'll come over. So I called my friend Mike, and we got there early because it takes a long time to get a drinking drunk ready to do anything. And I reminded him, because he protested, that it's okay, it's Alcoholics Anonymous is for people who can't stop drinking. And so we got him dressed, and we went to a little club in our city, the West Side Club, where you can still smoke. You don't even need cigarettes. You just breathe deeply. And we took my brother there, and he was ripe, and they welcomed him. They didn't let him disrupt the meeting, but they welcomed him. Yeah. And they loved him. And I don't think he remembered anything he heard. He was too drunk to remember anything he heard, but he obviously remembered what he experienced. What he experienced was the love of Alcoholics Anonymous, because he went back. Yeah, and he went back. And he eventually got sober, and he had 2 years in November and was in a halfway house. And for a variety of reasons, he's been keeping himself sober, he drank again. And now his new sobriety date is March 20th. And it was amazing when he drank again, and I'm still digesting this because I didn't have any emotional trauma. I mean, I'd love my brother to be I would love my brother to experience all of this, but I don't know what he needs. What I do know is that I love him. I mean, I love my brother. Drunk or sober, I love him. And I know he knows that. He knows that he can't move in with me. And he's asked, over the last 2 years, he's asked several times, and I've prayed about it, and I know it's not good. It would not be a loving thing for him. And it's because of God that I can say no, and let him know that I know that you're capable of getting a job. I know you're capable of being self-supporting. I'll help you with that, and I will. But he just he doesn't know. He doesn't know what he's capable of. He's going to discover it, I think. But he's sober one day at a time. He's back into meetings, and who knows? Who knows where his journey will take him? But my goodness, what he's taught me. I can love my brother, drunk or sober. The way the 12th step works in my life today, I am blessed and surrounded by so many wonderful people and so many wonderful women. I get to walk this journey with so many sisters, and I get to see the miracle manifested everywhere. The 12th tradition keeps coming to mind, and it's one I've been meditating upon for some time in the long form. And just very quickly, the 12th tradition, which, by the way, I and there's obviously no time today, I so appreciate what the traditions do in my work life, in my home life, on the interstate, when I'm at the drugstore. The concept of having unity in all my relationships and putting the group welfare, whatever group that might be, above my own personal welfare has literally transformed my world. The 12th tradition says, and finally, we of Alcoholics Anonymous believe that the principle of anonymity has an immense spiritual significance. It reminds us that we are to place principles before personalities, that we are actually to practice a genuine humility. This to the end that our great blessings may never spoil us, that we shall forever live in thankful contemplation of Him who presides over us all. And as I meditate upon this principle of anonymity has an immense spiritual significance. What does that mean? I mean, there's personal anonymity. There's anonymity at the level of press, radio, and film. But the anonymity, the way this touches me today, this immense spiritual significance is, for the longest time, I believed that my sobriety was my gift. For whatever reason, I was blessed with sobriety. It's my arrogance, to think that for some reason, I got this blessing and somebody else didn't. What I believe today, in light of the 12th tradition, is that God, who is immensely spiritual and is spiritual significance, is anonymous. And that my sobriety really has very little to do with me, and that my sobriety has a great deal to do with how God wants to love someone else through me. And I'll tell you how I came to understand this. It's by walking with others. And when I watch women get sober, and when I watch women use these principles, and when I watch what happens in the lives of their children and their spouses and their parents, and when I watch all these lives being touched by their sobriety, I am convinced beyond a doubt that their sobriety has very little to do with them and so much to do with God loving those kids and loving those spouses and loving those parents through them. We're just channels. We're just channels. To be reminded to place principles before personalities, for me, is about placing these principles above my personality, not yours. It's my personality that will get in the way. And to practice a genuine humility, I'm not quite sure I understand what that means. I understand that humility is truth, and to practice a genuine truth probably means to understand more deeply that I don't understand. And this to the end that our great blessings may never spoil us. Oh, I've been spoiled, thinking that my sobriety is about me or that I know something. No. A genuine humility, that we may never be spoiled, that we shall forever live in thankful contemplation of Him who presides over us all. God's not just loving me or you, He's loving us all. I'm just not always awake to it, but it's happening. What a journey, and I just feel like I'm at the beginning, just at the beginning. More will be revealed. What I'd like to suggest, if you wouldn't mind, is I've got this meditation that literally came from God some years ago, and it's one of my favorite. And if you'd be willing to join me, then if you'd like to just get comfortable and gently close your eyes. For me, meditation, by the way, I do exactly what the book suggests in the 11th step, and I've done a lot of other things, and then I've come back to exactly what the book suggests in the 11th step, and then I add to. So if you'd like to gently close your eyes and let us start the way we start life, with a deep breath in and out. As we breathe, let's imagine. Imagine that you are not your personality. Your compassion for others, let it go. Your judgment of others, let it go. Your ability to make others laugh, let it go. Your ability to make others cry, let it go. Everything that makes up your personality, with each breath, let it go. You are not your personality. Imagine that you are not your mind. Your mind that decides what is right and what is wrong. Let it go. Your mind that makes decisions about what to do and what not to do. Let it go. Your mind that believes it knows what is good and what is bad. Let it go. Every thought, idea, and opinion, let it go. You are not your mind. Imagine that you are not your body. You are not your feet or your legs. Let them go. You are not your hands or your arms. Let them go. With each breath in and out, let your body go. Breathe. Imagine that you are not your disease. It is in you, but it is not you. Let it go. Breathe. You are not your personality. You are not your mind. You are not your body. Do you understand what you are? You are God's creation. You are eternal. Breathe. Thank you all for the blessing of today. I love you. Go in peace.
Thank you for listening to Sober Sunrise. If you enjoyed today's episode, please give it a thumbs up as it will help share the message. Until next time, have a great day.